Let me tell you a short story. There was a small group of people who discovered a natural wellspring not too far below the ground. The people were overjoyed with the resource and built a small stone well to access it easily. They were able to develop a small community thanks to the well. In time, the town grew and it became prosperous. All types of innovation formed and the people lived happily for some time. No one touched the well or made any updates to it as it seemed fine as it was. In fact, those who became the great innovators of this town scarcely noticed the well and took it for granted. There were those who obsessed over the well, however, and saw it as the only thing they should be paying attention to. One day, the well that had provided for them for so long stopped producing water. The people didn't know what to do and the town fell into disarray. The people were divided. There were those who were certain they had to move to another place. They were convinced the well had run its course and felt confident their innovations would help them find resources elsewhere. However, others clung to the well and were certain that any moment now water would reappear. They hated the other people for their arrogance and felt they owed everything to the original well. The town started to turn on itself. One person saw that perhaps there was another solution. This person had great respect for the original well and also the innovations of the town. This person used the innovations to investigate the stone well and realized there was an enormous untapped area of the wellspring that the current stone well couldn't reach. He explained this to the town and the people got to work. They used their new innovations to create a new structure that was more sophisticated than the previous one and were able to utilize the incredible wellspring right beneath their feet. The people were united in the process and thrived once again. This short story outlines something that both inspires and concerns me. At its heart, it speaks to a truth about human endeavors, that many of our greatest achievements, from spiritual traditions to scientific discoveries, originate from the same wellspring of inspiration. Similarly, science and religion were once connected by a shared source of inspiration. However, the two have diverged over time, each losing touch with the vitality that both originally gave rise to them and united them. This disconnection, I believe, has led to instability and fragmentation in both domains. It seems to me that in the depths of religion, there is something very deep and profound about the human condition. However, I can't help but shake the feeling that in many cases, this is misunderstood on both the religious and scientific side of the spectrum. You're watching Archetypal Wisdom. Join me in exploring the symbolic truths and mysteries of humankind. Remember to like and subscribe. Now, back to the video. The wellspring of water in the story symbolizes what I feel is so often missed. This is the great force of inspiration that seems to bubble up from a deeply mysterious and unknown part of the human psyche. Religious stories tap into this force by operating on an archetypal level, embodying timeless truths about the human experience. They provide frameworks for meaning, helping individuals and societies navigate life's mysteries, moral choices, and crises. Religion, in this sense, isn't merely a set of beliefs. It's a mirror of the psyche's deepest patterns, reflecting universal struggles and aspirations. Connecting with original inspiration is key. Over time, we detach from original inspiration when we make structures and institutions out of it. In the story, this plays out with both the people who become attached to the stone well, forgetting it connects to a deeper wellspring, and the innovators thinking they can simply move on, forgetting the wellspring laid the foundation for them to innovate. In fact, the Bible contains a powerful example of this very pattern, a theme that points to the mysterious force of inspiration so often misunderstood or even rejected. The relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees beautifully illustrates this dynamic. Jesus is consistently antagonized by the Pharisees, the religious people of the day. They cling to the religious law and accuse Christ of blasphemy, leading to a murderous end. Jesus repetitively states who he is, where he is going, and proclaims to be the one prophesied about. But the Pharisees cannot accept this. They cling to the religious law as they understand it, leading to a brutal end. There, of course, is a painful irony to this aspect of the story because the very thing the Pharisees claim to be worshipping and protecting has come before them embodied. Yet they cannot see this. They are blinded by that which they cling to, and they can no longer grasp the truth. Looking at this psychologically, it is a remarkable example of how structures which people form and organize can become totally detached from the original inspiration which gave rise to them. In the case of the Pharisees, they cling to a religion which formed from the prophets before them, who were trying to revitalize their relationship with God after the fall. Yet God appears directly, teaching and guiding and updating the law as they understand it, and they reject it. Well, this seems to be an incredibly deep psychological truth about human beings. We continuously seem to be susceptible to a kind of psychological dogmatism which closes us off to something remarkable. This remarkable thing which we seem to close ourselves off to is the wellspring, the source of inspiration, which could be called divine inspiration, or in more psychological language, the genius of the unconscious. I believe this pattern, losing touch with the original inspiration behind a structure, recurs across all human endeavors, as it is rooted deeply in our psychology. So why is this really a problem? Well, if something loses the life force which gave it rise in the first place, it will atrophy and decay. To those who aren't religious, this may not seem of any concern, which is understandable. Yet just like the innovators in the story who take the stone well for granted, the moment it stops reaching the wellspring, the town falls into chaos. They forgot that the well connected them to the wellspring which laid the foundation for them to innovate in the first place. In other words, the symbolic inference is that science was an organic outgrowth of religious ideas. The birth of modern science in the 16th and 17th century can be traced to Christian assumptions. For example, order in creation, which is the belief that the universe is structured and intelligible, making investigation meaningful. Also in the concept of truth as liberating. Christianity emphasizes truth as a divine pursuit, which scientists like Newton embraced. This perspective is also reflected in the idea of humility before nature, where early scientists viewed their work as a means of uncovering God's design, an act of reverence, not control. There are countless ways in which the origins of science were a natural development of the value system and psychological structure underneath Christianity. Inevitably, science has grown extraordinarily, and in its growth, it has developed its own value structure and philosophy, which is that of reductionism and materialism. In the last century, there has been a popular perspective of atheism within the scientific community, and now culturally, which views religion as simply an outdated model of the world. However, interestingly enough, this has led to all kinds of issues within the scientific enterprise, threatening its stability. For example, there has been an erosion of public trust towards science as a result of science becoming increasingly influenced by corporate and political interests. The commitment to truth has in some cases been supplanted by financial incentives, career advancement, or public influence. This shift can lead science to selective data reporting, statistical manipulation, and even outright fraud, compromising the objectivity of scientific research. This is one of the ways in which its dismissal of religious origins, in particular truth as an ultimate ideal, has started to threaten the strength of the entire structure. Another example is the compartmentalization of science can result in conflicting findings, lack of interdisciplinary collaboration, and loss of holistic understanding. For example, the environmental crises we face today are partly due to a fragmented approach, where technological and economic advances were made without considering ecological consequences. This is a result of the loss of order in creation, which allows for a big-picture holistic perspective. Likewise, science has lost the sense of humility that characterized its formative years, the reverence and awe once present in its pursuit. This has led to an intellectual arrogance and what is referred to as scientism, the belief that science is the only valid way of knowing and that everything outside of it is irrelevant or inferior. This is an attitude in which science claims authority not only over physical realities, but also over existential, ethical, and even aesthetic questions. This can alienate the public who seek meaning beyond the purely empirical. Intellectual arrogance within science can stifle innovation, as rigid paradigms resist new ideas that don't fit within the established framework. This matters today more than ever. From ethical dilemmas in tech to environmental crises, the lack of a unifying framework in science has led to fragmentation in a crisis of purpose. When science loses its ethical and existential grounding, it struggles to address these larger societal issues, leading to consequences that affect every part of our lives. It doesn't take much foresight to see how, if these types of developments continue unchecked, the entire enterprise of science and its credibility will be under threat. This is something we should be concerned about because science has led to countless incredible innovations and improvements in our quality of life. The case I'm making today is that there is something incredibly deep, a wellspring if you will, at the heart of religion which is very important. Now, I have a very deep respect for religion, and I have met a number of religious people I truly admire. However, I believe that the split and dismissal of religion by science are, in part, a psychological response to shortcomings within the religious establishment itself. This failing I speak of brings us back to the same pattern of the Pharisees, the people who have used what they believe to be the divine truth as a right to enforce law on others. This, of course, has produced great harm in many instances, and I believe has largely contributed to a collective sentiment of not trusting the religious enterprise. In fact, in the early days of science, of course, there were plenty of vicious reactions to new theories. One of the most famous examples being Galileo and the heliocentric model. The heliocentric model posited that the Earth orbited the Sun, but the popular belief at the time wasn't a scientific perspective, but a theological one. The religious enterprise believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe. Galileo was tried and arrested for his heretical views and forced to retract his belief about the heliocentric model. This is a great example of how religion negatively repressed innovation out of fear, but of course this type of repression also played out socially in culture. Many of these types of religious people who harshly throw about the religious law cause great harm to people socially as well. In fact, this seems to be a great case study of shadow projection, which is a term from Jungian psychology which essentially outlines the phenomenon of someone projecting that which is repressed and feared in their own psyche, their shadow, onto others. This, of course, in time has led to a distrust in the religious enterprise as a whole by many. It is this harsh dogmatism which I believe has cut off many from the wellspring, both religious and non-religious people. These are the people in the story who didn't want to leave the well, which seems like the right intuition as the wellspring was there, but they also didn't want to do anything other than wait. It seems to me that there is clearly great vitality within the archetypal stories embedded in the Bible, and that they have also led to outgrowths of great prosperity. However, we now find ourselves as a collective in a fractured place, with both an ever-pervasive sentiment of nihilism and loss of meaning socially, alongside a scientific enterprise that seems to be losing its stable footing. In fact, ironically, in this modern era of casting out religion as being simply an outdated model, there appears to be more and more religious fervor emerging in other parts of society, creating new types of tyranny and stifled innovation. This religious fervor and dogmatic quality I mentioned can be seen in the political and social domains of society. It can also be seen in some of the more rigid parts of science which shut down the possibility of exploring more mysterious areas, due to the risk of it changing their current paradigm too much. It seems to me that both the domains of religion and science have fallen into the psychological trap which is outlined in the tension between Christ and the Pharisees. The pattern of people forgetting the core essence which gave rise to the structure they hold dear. So how do we wrestle with the deep split within the collective between the religious perspective and the more secular perspective? How do we reclaim the vitality that gave rise to both religion and science and reintegrate it to help stabilize our society in both its value structures and intellectual innovative domains? Psychology appears to be the bridge between these two realms that could reignite this vitality. Psychology is versatile as it deals with the mind and therefore has to be versatile given the complexity of the human psyche. It has its hands in both the empirical and scientific, such as medical psychology, as well as the more abstract and mysterious, such as psychology of mythic and theological symbolism. It seems to me that psychology could be our way to integrate the ancient truths and wisdom encoded in the biblical scripture, but through a modern lens. The great Carl Jung, for example, used the concept of archetypes to reveal how religious symbols express universal psychological truths. His work showed that symbols from myth and religion, such as the hero's journey, illustrate fundamental patterns of human behavior and growth. More recently, Ian McGilchrist's research into the brain hemispheres supports a balanced approach, arguing that while the left hemisphere favors control and analysis, the right hemisphere is open to meaning and intuition. Together they remind us that science and religion each reflect vital aspects of the human experience. It seems that we actually need to integrate these psychological structures within these ancient texts in a more sophisticated way. In the same way the people of the town rebuilt their connection to the wellspring, we too can reconnect with the deep inspiration that lies at the heart of both science and religion. Psychology, I believe, offers the tools to rediscover this wellspring, integrating the wisdom of the past with the discoveries of the present to help us thrive once again. You've been watching Archetypal Wisdom. Remember to like and subscribe. Stay wise.